The emergency alarm echoed through station Kepler 7 as beings from across the galaxy rushed to the main assembly hall. Captain Jinho Park adjusted his uniform and walked quickly down the metal corridors of the massive space station. His boots made soft clicks on the floor as he passed windows showing the endless stars outside. He had been called here along with representatives from dozens of worlds, but nobody had told him why. The assembly hall was packed with aliens of all shapes and sizes. Some had tentacles instead of arms, others had scales that changed colors, and a few looked almost human except for their strange eyes or extra limbs. Jinho found a seat near the back and watched as Dr. Kira Voss stepped onto the central platform. She was one of the most respected xenobiologists in the galaxy, someone who had studied dangerous life forms on hundreds of worlds. Dr. Voss pressed a button on her control pad, and a holographic image appeared above her head. The creature that materialized made several beings in the audience gasp and move back in their seats. It was roughly the size of an earth tiger, but looked nothing like any animal Jinho had ever seen. The beast had midnight black fur that seemed to shimmer and shift like liquid shadow. Bone spikes jutted from its shoulders and spine, glowing with a faint blue light. Its eyes were pure silver and seemed to track the movements of everyone in the room, even though it was just a recording. "This is a shadow maw from the planet Umbros Prime," Dr. Voss began, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "They are the apex predators of one of the most dangerous death worlds we have ever encountered. Each adult weighs approximately 200 kilograms and possesses intelligence comparable to Earth dolphins. Their bone spikes can pierce standard armor plating, and their skin can change color to match any environment." The hologram showed the creature moving through what looked like a crystal forest. Its fur shifted from black to transparent to silver as it stalked between glowing trees. When it moved, it made no sound at all, like a ghost sliding through the landscape. 3 separate colonization attempts have been made on Umbros Prime over the past 50 years, Dr. Voss continued. Each colony was completely destroyed within 6 months. No survivors were ever found. The Shadow Maws hunt in packs of up to 20 individuals and show tactical coordination that surpasses most military units. A new image appeared showing the aftermath of one of the failed colonies. Buildings were torn apart as if by massive claws, and strange burn marks covered the metal structures. Jinho felt a chill run down his spine as he imagined what the colonists must have faced. Commander So-Young Kim leaned over from the seat next to Jinho and whispered, "Why are they telling us this now? Those colony attempts were decades ago." Dr. Voss seemed to hear the murmuring in the crowd and raised her hand for silence. "The situation on Umbros Prime has changed dramatically in recent months. Our long-range sensors indicate that a plague has swept through the planet. The adult Shadow Maw population appears to be dying out rapidly." This caused excited chatter throughout the assembly hall. If the dangerous predators were gone, that would mean the planet could finally be colonized. Umbros Prime was known to contain some of the richest trilithium deposits in the galaxy, a rare element essential for faster-than-light travel. However, Dr. Voss said loudly, cutting through the noise, this development has created an even more dangerous situation. Our scouts have detected large numbers of Shadow Maw cubs scattered across the planet. These juvenile creatures are even more unpredictable and vicious than their parents. A new hologram appeared showing smaller versions of the terrifying predators. The cubs were about the size of house cats but had the same bone spikes and silver eyes as the adults. Even as babies, they looked deadly. Unlike adult Shadow Maws, which hunt with strategy and purpose, the cubs kill purely on instinct, Dr. Voss explained. They cannot be reasoned with, contained, or relocated. Every attempt to capture or study them has resulted in the deaths of our research teams. The cubs appear cute and harmless until they mature at approximately 6 months of age. At that point, they become killing machines with all the abilities of their parents, but none of the restraint. Dr. Hyunwoo Lee, the chief xenobiologist aboard, Jinho's ship was taking detailed notes on his portable computer. Jinho noticed that Dr. Lee seemed more interested than afraid, which was typical for the young scientist. Dr. Lee had joined their crew only 2 years ago, but had already proven himself by successfully studying hostile life forms on 3 different worlds. The Galactic Council hereby declares Umbros Prime to be permanently off-limits to all species, Dr. Voss announced. Any ship found within the system boundaries will be considered in violation of galactic law. The planet will be quarantined until the remaining Shadow Maw cubs die of natural causes, which our projections indicate will take approximately 10 to 15 years. The announcement caused an uproar in the assembly hall. Representatives from mining corporations stood up and shouted protests. The trilithium on Umbros Prime was worth billions of credits, and several companies had already invested heavily in equipment and preparation for mining operations. Jinho felt So Young's elbow in his ribs and turned to look at her. She was pointing at her data pad, which showed the current market price for trilithium. The number was staggering. With those resources, humanity could build a fleet 3 times larger than their current one and secure their position among the major galactic powers. The decision is final, Dr. Voss said firmly. We have tried every known method of dealing with these creatures. Stun weapons have no effect on them. Containment fields cannot hold them. Even our most advanced combat robots have been destroyed by packs of these cubs. They are simply too dangerous to risk any further contact. As the assembly began to break up, Jinho noticed Dr. Lee studying his computer screen with intense concentration. The young scientist was reviewing the data that Dr. Voss had presented, but his expression suggested he was seeing something different than everyone else. "What is it?" Jinho asked as they walked back toward their ship. Dr. Lee looked up from his screen with a thoughtful expression. "Something does not add up about these creatures, Captain. The behavior patterns Dr. Voss described do not match what I am seeing in the recorded footage." So Young raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The cubs in the videos show signs of extreme stress and fear rather than natural aggression," Dr. Lee explained. "Their body language is similar to orphaned animals on Earth when they are separated from their parents. I think they might be reacting to trauma rather than following their natural instincts." Jinho stopped walking and turned to face his science officer. "Are you suggesting that the Galactic Council is wrong about these creatures?" Dr. Lee hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I think it is possible that nobody has tried the right approach with them. Every expedition has treated them as monsters to be destroyed or contained. What if someone tried to help them instead?" The 3 humans stood in the corridor as other beings walked past them toward their ships. Jinho could see the wheels turning in Dr. Lee's mind, and he recognized the look of scientific curiosity that had gotten them into trouble before. But it had also led to some of their greatest discoveries. "Dr. Lee," Jinho said carefully, "please, tell me you are not thinking what I think you are thinking." Dr. Lee smiled and closed his computer. "Captain, someone needs to prove whether these creatures really are as dangerous as the Council believes. And if they are not, then humanity could gain access to the richest trilithium deposits in the galaxy." Captain Jinho Park stared out at the swirling purple clouds of Umbros Prime from the bridge of his ship. 3 weeks had passed since the council meeting, and he had spent every day thinking about Dr. Lee's words. The planet below them was supposed to be empty except for the deadly cubs, but Jinho found himself wondering if the council had made a mistake. "Captain," So Young said from her station, "we are maintaining position at the edge of the system as ordered. No other ships have approached the planet." Jinho nodded but kept looking at the world below. According to their sensors, Umbros Prime was beautiful despite being labeled a death world. The atmosphere was breathable for humans, and the temperature was similar to a pleasant spring day on Earth. Crystal formations covered much of the surface, creating rainbow patterns that sparkled in the light of the system's twin suns. "Dr. Lee," Jinho said without turning around, Have you completed your analysis of the council data? The young scientist looked up from his computer station with excitement in his eyes. Yes, Captain, and my findings are very interesting. The behavioral patterns of the cubs do not match any natural predator I have studied. Their stress indicators are consistent with abandoned young from dozens of different species. Explain, Jinho said, finally turning to face his science officer, Dr. Lee brought up a holographic display showing video footage of the Shadowmaw cubs. Look at their posture when humans approach. They lower their heads and bare their teeth, which most people interpret as aggressive behavior. But watch their ears and tail movements. The display zoomed in on one of the cubs. Jinho could see that while the creature was showing its teeth, its ears were flattened against its head and its tail was tucked between its legs. This is classic fear response, Dr. Lee continued. The cubs are not trying to attack the researchers. They are trying to make themselves look bigger and more threatening because they are terrified. So Young joined them at the display. But the research teams were still killed. Fear or not, these creatures are clearly dangerous. That is true, Dr. Lee agreed, but I believe the deaths occurred because the researchers approached them incorrectly. Every expedition treated the cubs as specimens to be captured, rather than as frightened children who needed help. Jinho felt a familiar stirring in his chest. It was the same feeling he had experienced when they first encountered the peaceful traders of Centauri Station, who had been labeled as pirates by other species. That situation had ended with humanity establishing one of their most profitable trade relationships. Dr. Lee, Jinho said slowly, if you are correct about these creatures, what would you recommend? The scientist's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. We should send a small team to the surface with no capture equipment and no weapons. Instead, we bring food, medical supplies, and tools to help them survive. We approach them the same way we would approach any frightened animal on Earth. That sounds extremely dangerous, So Young pointed out. If you are wrong about their behavior, a small team would have no way to defend themselves. Jinho walked to his command chair and sat down heavily. The smart choice would be to follow council orders and stay away from the planet. But humanity had not become a major galactic power by always making the smart choice. Sometimes they had succeeded by making the right choice instead. Dr. Lee, select a volunteer team of 4 people including yourself, Jinho said finally. We will make one reconnaissance mission to the surface. If you find evidence that supports your theory, we will proceed carefully. If not, we leave immediately. 2 days later, Dr. Lee stood in the shuttle bay with his selected team members. Security Chief Min-Soo Choi checked his equipment one final time, though he carried only a stunner and basic protective gear. Engineer Yoon-ji Song loaded medical supplies and emergency food rations into their packs. Medic Dae-hee Yoon reviewed the biological data they had on Shadowmaw cubs, preparing for any injuries they might encounter. Remember, Dr. Lee said as they boarded the shuttle, we are not here to capture anything or prove our superiority. We are here to help if we can and learn if they will let us. The shuttle descended through the purple clouds and emerged over a landscape that took everyone's breath away. Crystal trees stretched toward the sky like frozen lightning, their branches creating prisms that split the sunlight into countless rainbows. Rivers of liquid silver wound between hills covered in flowers that seemed to glow with their own inner light. It is beautiful, Dahi whispered as they flew over the alien terrain. And completely dead, Min-Soo added grimly. I am not seeing any movement down there at all. Dr. Lee checked his scanners. The life signs are concentrated in the cave systems about 10 kilometers to the north. The cubs seem to be hiding underground. They landed near a cluster of crystal caves that jutted from a hillside like giant teeth. The shuttle settled onto a flat area covered in soft purple grass that felt like velvet under their boots. The air smelled like cinnamon and rain, nothing like the toxic atmosphere they had expected. Stay close together, but do not make aggressive movements, Dr. Lee instructed as they approached the largest cave entrance. If we encounter any cubs, let me handle the initial contact. The cave entrance was wide enough for their entire team to walk side by side, and the crystal walls provided plenty of natural light. Strange symbols were carved into the stone, too regular to be natural formations but too alien to understand. These markings look fresh, Yunji observed, running her fingers over the smooth cuts in the crystal. Something made these recently. They had walked only a few hundred meters into the cave when Minsu held up his hand for silence. In the distance, they could hear soft sounds that might have been breathing or movement. Dr. Lee motioned for everyone to stay back as he moved forward alone. The cave opened into a large chamber filled with natural crystal formations that created a cathedral-like space. And there, huddled together on a raised platform of stone, were 6 shadow maw cubs. They were smaller than the videos had suggested, about the size of house cats, as Dr. Voss had said. Their fur was not the midnight black of their parents, but rather a soft gray color with darker spots. The bone spikes on their backs were tiny and looked more like decorative bumps than weapons. When they saw Dr. Lee, they immediately pressed closer together and made low warning sounds. "They are just babies," Da-hee whispered from behind Dr. Lee. The scientist slowly reached into his pack and pulled out one of their emergency food rations. He placed it on the ground halfway between himself and the cubs, then backed away several steps. The cubs watched him with their large silver eyes but did not approach the food. For nearly an hour, the team waited in silence while the cubs watched them suspiciously. Finally, the smallest of the group began to move toward the food ration. It was clearly weaker than the others, stumbling slightly as it walked. When it reached the package, it sniffed carefully before tearing into the wrapper with tiny claws. The moment the cub tasted the food, it made a sound that none of them had expected. It was a soft, purring noise, similar to what an earth cat might make when content. The other cubs immediately moved forward to share the meal, and soon all 6 were purring as they ate. "That sound has never been documented before," Dr. Lee said quietly. Every previous expedition reported only aggressive vocalizations. As they watched the cubs eat, Yunji noticed something important. Look at their body condition. They are severely malnourished and dehydrated. These are not healthy predators. These are starving orphans. Da-hee moved slowly toward the cubs with a medical scanner in her hand. Instead of running away or attacking, the cubs watched her approach with curiosity. When she knelt down near the smallest one, it actually moved closer to her and continued purring. "Captain," Dr. Lee said into his communicator, "we have made contact with the cubs. I need to report that everything the council told us about these creatures appears to be wrong." Dr. Lee knelt beside the smallest cub as Da-hee carefully examined its injuries. The little creature had not moved away when she approached, instead seeming to understand that she was trying to help. Its silver eyes watched her every movement, with an intelligence that surprised all of them. "This cub has several infected wounds and shows signs of severe malnutrition," Da-hee reported quietly. "Without treatment, it will not survive more than a few days." The other cubs had finished eating and were now exploring the cave chamber where the humans sat. Instead of the aggressive behavior described in council reports, they showed curiosity about the visitors and their equipment. One cub sniffed at Yunji's tool pack, while another investigated Minsu's boots with gentle touches of its nose. "They are acting like normal young animals," Minsu observed, his initial suspicion beginning to fade. Curious and playful, not vicious. Dr. Lee made a decision that would change everything. "We are going to establish a temporary base here in this cave system. These cubs need immediate care, and we need time to study their actual behavior rather than relying on the council's assumptions." Over the following days, the team worked to create a safe and comfortable environment for both humans and cubs. Yunji used her engineering skills to set up basic facilities, including a water purification. system and portable shelters. The cubs watched her work with fascination, sometimes trying to help by bringing her small tools or pieces of crystal that caught their attention. Da-hee focused on the medical needs of the cubs, treating their wounds and providing them with proper nutrition. She discovered that their diet consisted mainly of a type of crystal fruit that grew deep in the cave systems, along with small silver fish from the underground streams. The cubs had been starving because they were too young to hunt effectively for these food sources on their own. "Look at this," Da-hee said excitedly as she showed Dr. Lee her medical scans. "Their brain structure is remarkably complex. The neural pathways are similar to Earth dolphins, but with additional regions that suggest even higher cognitive abilities." The smallest cub, which Da-hee had begun calling Bomb because it reminded her of the Korean word for spring, had become particularly attached to Dr. Lee. It followed him everywhere and seemed to understand simple commands in Korean. When Dr. Lee said "come" in Korean, Bomb would approach. When he said "stay," the cub would sit and wait patiently. Min-soo remained cautious, but began to warm up to the cubs when they showed protective behavior toward the humans. When a section of the cave wall partially collapsed during their second week, the cubs immediately positioned themselves between the humans and the falling debris, using their small bodies as shields despite the obvious danger to themselves. "They are trying to protect us," Min-soo said with amazement after they had cleared the rubble. "These supposed killing machines are risking their lives to keep us safe." Yoonji made another remarkable discovery when she began creating enrichment activities for the cubs. She built simple puzzle boxes that required multiple steps to open and retrieve food rewards. Not only did the cubs solve these puzzles quickly, but they also began to modify Yoonji's designs to make them more challenging for themselves. "Watch this," Yoonji said as she demonstrated one of Bomb's modifications. The little cub had somehow rearranged the internal mechanisms of a puzzle box to require an additional step before it would open. Bomb is not just solving puzzles, he is creating new ones. Dr. Lee documented everything carefully, building a comprehensive record of the cubs' behavior that contradicted every assumption the council had made. The cubs showed empathy when humans were injured or upset, bringing them small gifts of pretty crystals or simply sitting close to provide comfort. They demonstrated problem-solving abilities that surpassed many adult members of other galactic species. Most importantly, they showed no signs of the violent tendencies that were supposed to emerge as they matured. "Captain," Dr. Lee reported, "during one of their daily communications, we have been here for 3 weeks, and the cubs have grown considerably. According to council data, they should be entering their aggressive phase, but their behavior has only become more gentle and cooperative." Captain Jin-ho had been following their progress with growing interest and concern. "What you are describing sounds wonderful, Dr. Lee, but you are still in direct violation of council orders. How long do you need to complete your research?" "That is the problem, Captain. The more we learn about these creatures, the more we realize that separating them from us now would be traumatic for both species. They have bonded with us as their family unit. Taking them away from their parents destroyed their natural development. We have become their new family." This statement worried Min-soo, who had been thinking about the practical implications of their situation. "Dr. Lee, what happens when we have to leave? We cannot take 6 alien predators back to human space, and we cannot abandon them here to starve." Dae-hee had been considering the same problem. "Actually, I do not think we can leave them at all. My medical scans show that their stress levels spike dramatically whenever we are away from the cave for more than a few hours. They have formed such strong emotional bonds with us that separation could cause serious psychological damage." The cubs seemed to sense the tension in their human companions and became more affectionate in response. Bomb spent most of his time pressed against Dr. Lee's side, purring softly and occasionally making small, chirping sounds that seemed to be attempts at human speech. The other cubs showed similar attachment behaviors with their preferred human partners. "We have created an impossible situation," Dr. Lee admitted during a team meeting. The Council believes these creatures are monsters that must be destroyed, but we know they are intelligent, gentle beings who need family bonds to survive. If we reveal the truth, the Council will demand proof. If we provide that proof, they will want to study the cubs in laboratory conditions that would be harmful to them. Yunji had been working on a different approach. What if we do not have to choose between the cubs and the Council? These creatures could be incredibly valuable partners for humans. Their intelligence, their natural abilities, and their loyalty could make them perfect companions for dangerous exploration missions. The Council will never approve such a partnership, Minsu pointed out. They are too afraid of these creatures to consider any form of cooperation. Dr. Lee looked at Bomb, who was currently helping Yunji organize her tools by sorting them into neat piles according to size and function. The little cub's concentration and careful movements showed a level of intelligence and dexterity that most galactic species could not match. Then we will have to prove to the Council that their fears are unfounded, Dr. Lee said finally. But first, we need to contact Captain Jinho and explain that our mission has changed. We are no longer just studying these creatures. We are preparing to introduce a new intelligent species to the galaxy. As if understanding the importance of the moment, all 6 cubs gathered around their human friends and began to purr in harmony. The sound filled the crystal cave with a music that seemed to celebrate the bond between 2 very different species who had found family in each other. That evening, as Dr. Lee prepared his report for Captain Jin Ho, Bomb curled up next to him and watched the human work. Occasionally, the cub would point at the screen with one tiny claw and make questioning sounds, as if trying to understand what Dr. Lee was writing. "I am writing about you," Dr. Lee explained in Korean. "I am telling our captain that you and your friends are not monsters at all. You are just children who needed someone to care about you." Bomb chirped softly and pressed his head against Dr. Lee's hand. In that simple gesture, the human scientist saw the future of interspecies cooperation and the beginning of a partnership that would change both their worlds forever. Inspector Thane Zoran stepped off his Council enforcement vessel with the confidence of someone who had never been wrong about a dangerous situation. His 4 arms moved in precise coordination as he adjusted his scanning equipment and checked his weapon systems. Behind him, a squad of heavily armed Council peacekeepers prepared their stun nets and containment fields. "Captain Park," Zoran said as he approached Jin Ho on the landing platform, "our surveillance satellites detected extended human activity in the Umbros Prime system despite the Council prohibition. You will explain this violation immediately." Jin Ho had been dreading this moment for weeks. His team on the surface had been sending increasingly positive reports about their work with the cubs, but he knew the Council would not view their mission as a breakthrough in interspecies cooperation. They would see it as a dangerous breach of galactic law. "Inspector, my science team discovered important information about the Shadow Maw cubs that contradicts the Council's assessment of their danger level," Jin Ho began carefully. Zoran's compound eyes glittered with suspicion. "Captain, the Council's Xenobiology Department spent months analyzing these creatures. Dr. Voss is the most respected expert in the galaxy on predator species. Are you suggesting that your single human scientist knows more than our entire research division?" So Young stood beside her captain, her hand resting near her sidearm, despite knowing it would be useless against Zoran's advanced armor. "Inspector, perhaps you should review our data before making any decisions about our team." "Commander Kim, I am not here to review data," Zoran replied sharply. "I am here to enforce Council law and eliminate a threat to galactic security. Your people have been living in close proximity to juvenile Shadow Maws for over a month. By now, those creatures should have matured enough to pose a lethal danger." On the planet's surface, Dr. Lee was conducting his daily observations when his communication device chirped with an emergency signal. Captain Jin Ho's voice came through with unusual tension. "Dr. Lee, we have a situation up here. Council Inspector Zoran has arrived with a military escort. He intends to come down to your location and destroy the cubs immediately. Dr. Lee felt his heart sink as he looked at the 6 cubs who were currently playing together in the main cave chamber. Bomb was teaching the others a game that involved stacking crystal fragments in specific patterns, demonstrating the mathematical thinking abilities that Dr. Lee had documented over the past weeks. "Captain, you have to give us more time," Dr. Lee whispered urgently. "The cubs are not dangerous. They are highly intelligent beings who deserve a chance to prove themselves." "I am sorry, Doctor, but Zoran will not listen to arguments. He is coming down with enough firepower to level the entire cave system." Dahi looked up from her medical equipment with alarm. "Dr. Lee, what is happening?" Before he could answer, the sound of approaching shuttles echoed through the cave entrance. The cubs immediately sensed the change in their human friend's behavior and moved closer for comfort. Bomb pressed against Dr. Lee's leg and made soft, questioning sounds. "It is going to be okay," Dr. Lee said in Korean, though he was not sure if he believed his own words. Inspector Zoran entered the cave with his weapons drawn and his scanning equipment active. The moment his sensors detected the cubs, he raised his primary weapon and began charging it for a lethal blast. 6 juvenile shadow maws confirmed, he announced to his team. "Approaching maturity based on size estimates. Immediate termination authorized." "Wait!" Dr. Lee stepped between Zoran and the cubs, spreading his arms wide. "These creatures are not hostile. They have been living peacefully with us for weeks." Zoran paused but kept his weapon raised. "Doctor, you have been manipulated by these predators. Juvenile shadow maws are known to display false submission behaviors before attacking. Stand aside immediately." Min-Soo moved to support Dr. Lee, despite knowing that their small team could not physically stop the council forces. "Inspector, at least observe the cubs' behavior before you make any irreversible decisions." "I do not need to observe anything," Zoran replied coldly. "The science is settled on these creatures." At that moment, Bomb did something that changed the entire situation. The little cub walked slowly toward Inspector Zoran, with his head held high and his silver eyes focused on the alien's face. Instead of showing the aggressive posturing that Zoran expected, Bomb sat down directly in front of the inspector and began to purr. Zoran's weapon wavered slightly as he stared at the small creature. "This behavior is not consistent with our data." Yoonji saw an opportunity and took it. "Inspector, would a vicious predator react to strangers this way? Bomb is trying to communicate with you." As if to prove her point, Bomb stood up and walked over to one of Yoonji's puzzle boxes. With careful precision, he solved the complex mechanism in less than 30 seconds, then brought the opened box to Zoran and placed it at his feet like a gift. "Impossible," Zoran muttered, lowering his weapon slightly. "Shadow maws do not exhibit tool use or gift-giving behaviors." The other 5 cubs seemed to understand that something important was happening. They each performed different demonstrations of their intelligence and gentleness. One cub began to organize the council troops' scattered equipment, sorting items by size and function. Another approached one of Zoran's soldiers who had a minor injury and began making soft healing sounds while gently licking the wound. Da-hee stepped forward with her medical scanner. "Inspector, I have been monitoring these cubs' biological functions for weeks. Their brain chemistry shows no signs of the aggressive hormones that should be present in maturing predators. Instead, they show elevated levels of oxytocin and other bonding chemicals." "These readings could be fabricated," Zoran said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Dr. Lee saw that the inspector was beginning to doubt his preconceptions and pressed the advantage. "Inspector, I invite you to spend 1 hour observing these creatures without any interference from my team. Let them show you their true nature." Zoran considered this request while watching Bomb, who had now moved on to examining the inspector's scanning equipment with obvious curiosity rather than fear. The cubs' gentle touches and careful exploration of the unfamiliar technology demonstrated a level of self-control that contradicted everything in the council files. 1 hour, Zoran agreed finally. But my troops will maintain ready positions, and at the first sign of aggression, we will terminate all 6 creatures. What followed was the most important hour in the history of human-council relations. The cubs seemed to understand that they were being tested and responded by demonstrating their best behaviors. They solved complex puzzles, showed empathy toward injured team members, and even attempted to communicate using simple gestures and sounds. Bomb became particularly focused on Inspector Zoran, apparently recognizing him as the decision-maker. The cub brought him small gifts of pretty crystals, performed tricks to demonstrate his intelligence, and even attempted to mimic some of the inspector's four-armed gestures with his own smaller appendages. "This is unprecedented," Zoran admitted, as he watched Bomb carefully stack crystal fragments into a perfect spiral pattern. "No predator species has ever shown this level of cognitive flexibility and social awareness." Minsu had been watching the other council troops, who were also beginning to show signs of doubt about their mission. Several of them had lowered their weapons and were interacting cautiously with the cubs who approached them. "Inspector," Dr. Lee said quietly, "what if the council has been wrong about the nature versus nurture aspects of Shadow Maw behavior? What if these creatures only become aggressive when they are traumatized and isolated?" Zoran was silent for a long moment as he watched all 6 cubs working together to build an elaborate crystal sculpture. Their coordination and cooperation demonstrated social skills that exceeded those of many adult galactic species. "If what you suggest is true," Zoran said finally, "then the Council has made a serious error in judgment. But proving your theory would require extensive study and documentation." Dahi smiled for the first time in hours. "Inspector, we have been conducting that study for the past month. We have complete behavioral records, medical data, and intelligence assessments for all 6 cubs." As the hour concluded, Bomb made one final gesture that sealed the outcome. He approached Inspector Zoran with something in his mouth, a small crystal flower that he had somehow carved from the cave wall using his tiny claws. He placed the delicate artwork at Zoran's feet and looked up at the inspector with trusting, silver eyes. "Inspector," Dr. Lee said softly, "does this look like a monster to you?" The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered in the Great Assembly Hall to witness what many believed would be either humanity's greatest triumph or their most spectacular failure. Dr. Lee stood at the central podium with Bomb sitting calmly beside him, the little cub's silver eyes reflecting the lights from overhead. Dr. Voss sat in the front row with her arms crossed and her expression skeptical. As the galaxy's leading expert on predator species, her reputation was at stake. If Dr. Lee proved that her assessment of Shadow Maws was incorrect, it would undermine decades of her research and recommendations. "Honorable Council members," Dr. Lee began, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall, "I am here to present evidence that will fundamentally change our understanding of the species known as Shadow Maws." Behind him, a massive holographic display showed months of recorded footage from the caves of Umbros Prime. The images showed the 6 cubs engaging in complex behaviors that contradicted every assumption in the Council database. The Council classified these creatures as irredeemably violent predators based on observations of traumatized orphaned juveniles, Dr. Lee continued. However, our research demonstrates that Shadow Maws are actually highly social, intelligent beings who require stable family bonds to develop properly. Inspector Zoran stood from his seat in the observer section. After spending 3 additional weeks studying the cubs, he had become one of their strongest advocates. "Council members, I personally witnessed these creatures demonstrate problem-solving abilities emotional intelligence and cooperative behaviors that exceed those of most adult galactic citizens. The display showed Bomb working with Yunji to repair complex machinery, his small claws manipulating tools with precision, while his silver eyes tracked multiple variables simultaneously. Other footage showed the cubs caring for injured humans, creating art from crystal fragments and even attempting to learn spoken Korean. Dr. Voss stood up from her seat, her voice sharp with challenge. Dr. Lee, your research may show these particular cubs behaving peacefully now, but our data clearly indicates that shadow maws become increasingly aggressive as they mature. How do you explain the deaths of previous research teams? Dr. Lee had been expecting this question. Dr. Voss, every previous expedition approached these cubs as specimens to be captured and studied. The death reports show that the cubs only became violent when humans attempted to separate them from their siblings or confine them in small spaces. They were defending themselves and their family members. Bomb seemed to sense the tension in the room and moved closer to Dr. Lee, making soft, comforting sounds. The simple gesture of support between human and alien was broadcast to the entire galaxy through the Council's communication networks. Furthermore, Dr. Lee continued, our medical analysis reveals that the supposed aggressive hormones found in mature shadow maws are actually stress chemicals produced by social isolation. Cubs who are raised in stable family units do not develop these chemical imbalances. Dahi joined Dr. Lee at the podium carrying a portable medical scanner. Council members, I invite any representative to examine Bomb's biological readings. Despite being nearly 4 months old, which should put him at peak aggression according to previous data, his brain chemistry shows only elevated bonding hormones and emotional stability markers. A representative from the Centauri Alliance approached the podium with obvious nervousness. Bomb watched the alien carefully, then slowly extended one small paw toward the being's scanning device. The readings appeared immediately on the main display, showing neural activity patterns consistent with contentment and curiosity rather than predatory instincts. Remarkable, the Centauri representative whispered. These readings are similar to those of our own young during positive social bonding experiences. More representatives approached to conduct their own scans, each confirming that Bomb showed no signs of the violent tendencies described in council records. The little cub remained patient and cooperative throughout the examinations, occasionally purring when someone touched him gently. Captain Jin Ho was called to testify about the practical implications of the research. Council members, our team has lived and worked alongside these cubs for 3 months without a single incident of aggression. Instead, the cubs have actively protected human team members from environmental dangers and have contributed significantly to our scientific research. Captain Park, said the council president, are you suggesting that humanity wishes to establish a formal partnership with these creatures? Jin Ho looked at Dr. Lee, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, council president. We believe that shadow maws could become invaluable partners for dangerous exploration missions. Their intelligence, natural abilities, and loyalty make them ideal companions for expanding our knowledge of the galaxy. This statement caused excited murmuring throughout the assembly hall. The idea of humans partnering with former apex predators was unprecedented in galactic history. Dr. Voss stood again, her voice now more curious than hostile. Dr. Lee, assuming your theory is correct about the social nature of these beings, what would you recommend for the remaining cubs on Umbros? Prime? Dr. Lee smiled and activated a new section of his holographic display. Dr. Voss, Captain Jin Ho and I propose the establishment of the Umbros Partnership Program. Carefully selected human volunteers would be paired with Shadow Maw cubs, providing the stable family bonds they need while benefiting from their unique capabilities. The display showed detailed plans for a research station on Umbros Prime, where humans and cubs could live together safely. The facility would include educational areas, medical facilities, and training spaces designed for both species. The program would be voluntary for both humans and cubs, Dr. Lee explained. Partnerships would only be formed when both parties show natural compatibility and mutual attraction. As if to demonstrate this concept, Baum climbed onto Dr. Lee's lap and began, helping him operate the holographic controls. The little cub's precise movements and obvious understanding of the technology impressed even the most skeptical council members. So Young provided the military perspective from her position as a council observer. From a strategic standpoint, human Shadow Maw teams could explore environments too dangerous for either species alone. The cub's natural camouflage abilities, combined with human technology and planning skills, would open up previously impossible research opportunities. The council president called for a preliminary vote on whether to authorize further study of Dr. Lee's proposals. The result was overwhelming. Only 12 members voted against additional research, while over 300 supported moving forward with careful trials. Dr. Voss approached the podium after the vote, her expression thoughtful. "Dr. Lee, I owe you an apology. My research was based on incomplete data and incorrect assumptions. These cubs are clearly intelligent beings deserving of respect and protection." She knelt down beside Baum and extended her hand cautiously. The cub studied her for a moment, then gently touched her palm with his nose and began to purr. The sound carried through the assembly hall's speakers, and many representatives found themselves smiling at the simple gesture of interspecies friendship. "Council members," Dr. Voss said as she stood, "I formally request that my department's classification of Shadow Maws be changed from hostile predators to intelligent partners. Dr. Lee has proven that our fear was based on misunderstanding rather than fact." The final vote was unanimous. The Umbro's partnership program was approved for immediate implementation, with Dr. Lee designated as the primary researcher and Captain Jin Ho appointed as military liaison. As the council session concluded, Baum remained on stage with Dr. Lee, greeting representatives from dozens of worlds who wanted to meet the galaxy's newest intelligent species. The little cub handled the attention with dignity and grace, seeming to understand the historical importance of the moment. 6 months later, the first graduating class of human Shadow Maw teams prepared for their maiden voyage to explore the dangerous nebula systems beyond the galactic rim. Baum, now grown to the size of a large dog but still gentle and loyal, worked alongside Dr. Lee to calibrate their ship's sensors for the mission ahead. "Ready for adventure, partner?" Dr. Lee asked in Korean as they completed their pre-flight. Check's Baum chirped once in response and settled into the co-pilot's seat that had been specially designed for his anatomy. Through the viewport, they could see other human Shadow Maw teams preparing their own ships for various exploration missions across the galaxy. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about the dangers of assumptions and the power of compassion. And once again, humanity had proven that their greatest strength lay not in conquest or domination, but in their ability to see potential for friendship in the most unlikely places.